Drums are hard. Drums are really hard. Great drummers possess a number of unique skills and qualities. Things like an innate sense of rhythm, independent control and coordination of all their limbs, and a musical sensibility that allows them to create complex patterns and fills that are not only interesting to listen to, but also follow the mood and tempo of the music to craft a better song. As a simple caveman guitar player, I don't possess any of these qualities. I've sat down and tapped on a kit before, and it's never a good thing. Anything beyond ye old classic AC/DC beat, and it all just falls apart for me. So as a self-produced songwriter and guitar player, I needed a way to create drums for my music that didn't require the time, the space, the equipment, the knowledge, and the personnel to record a real kit. So for the past 10 years, I have been teaching myself the grueling process of programming MIDI drums for my own music. This is an art in itself that I personally still consider myself a novice at. I've learned enough in that time, however, to develop a method that works pretty well for me. And since I've had so many people over the years ask me what my process is for this, I thought I would create this video. This video is for any guitarist or self-produced songwriter like myself who wants to have realistic-ish sounding drums for their demos or even their finished produced music. Now, the DAW that I choose to use is Logic Pro. So you're probably gonna get the most value for this video if you're also using that workstation, but a lot of this information will translate to a number of different recording software options. So stick around, maybe there's something that you can gather from this, but my Logic Pro users out there, there's some really kind of helpful workflow tips that might help you if you're just starting this journey. We're going to talk about the process I use from the writing to the refining stage of programming MIDI drums, and talk about some of the philosophy behind creating a drum kit that I've had to learn over years and years of trial and error. I'll reiterate one more thing. I am not an expert in this topic. I am just like you guys. I'm set out on a journey to try and make better sounding music. So if any of you in the comments have any additional tips or thoughts on this process, feel free to leave them in the comments. If they're nice and constructive, they are gladly accepted and welcomed. If you're rude, I'm just gonna make fun of you in the comments. Okay, let's go. Okay, welcome to Logic. If you're familiar with this program, this should all look very familiar, but we're just gonna start from scratch, just in case anybody is new to the user interface. So the first things that we wanna do here when we're setting up our project is to figure out what our tempo is going to be, and that's up at the top here. So if we know what the tempo of this riff is, you can just scroll up and down here. But once I figure that out, let's just say 90. We can turn on our little metronome here. We should hear those clicks, right? We're hearing a metronome. Another important button here is this count in. This is going to give you 4 clicks before we start recording anything. So if I set my cursor on the playhead here and hit record, you're going to see 4 clicks, and then it starts recording. So this is great if you want to just start right on the beat. And of course you can always come in later and draw this back in. So like if you have a big guitar power slide at the beginning, you don't have to worry about that getting cut off. Usually what I do from this stage is I will set a click up to the tempo that I want and just start recording my riffs. And I'll lay the groundwork for what the song is going to be. I'll set up my intro riff if I have one. I'll write my verse, I'll write my chorus, my pre-chorus, and I'll kind of assemble these in blocks. It's helpful to think of your song in like the different sections. And you can come in and label these in Logic, which is really nice. You can add arrangement markers here and title your different sections of the song. Let's go ahead and fast forward through this process. I'm going to write a couple quick riffs, and then we'll dive in and start talking about how to put drums on the song. Okay, so welcome back. We have a few riffs recorded here. This is the next step in the writing process for me. So I've got my bass riff recorded. Let's take a listen to that real quick. Kind of a nice little riff with some syncopation, some opportunities for some breaks, accented cymbal hits, etc. A little bit further on here, we got some nice, slower, big chord parts. Right, and then we go into a verse. Syncopated bass part there. Right, so we have a couple of different dynamic options here. Let's bring in the guitars and hear what the full thing sounds like together. big fuzzy riff at the beginning, right? That's going to require a big drum part, and then we break it down into the verse, quote unquote, which is just bass at the start. So we're going to want a drum part that reflects that. And then I have a little guitar coming in here towards the end of our verse. Probably should have spent a little bit more time tuning the guitar there. Whoops. Back into your chorus, right? So yeah, not a bad start, right? I mean, we got a few different riffs. We have some different timing things, like a halftime feel. Now, the next step is let's figure out how we're gonna put some drums on this. Now I'm gonna show you the first way to do this, which is the most time consuming, is to come down to our new tracks, add a new software instrument track. And then in our library here, we're gonna look for drum kits. You can choose one of the kits in here, let's just say East Bay, and start a new MIDI track. And then the next step from here is come down to our editor window. I usually use the piano roll here, and we can see all of our different drum hits, right? So the first step would be to control click and decide what we want, like a kick drum. And from there you do kick. Let's add a snare. Oops. I mean, you can see how long that's going to take, right? That's just your kick and the snare. Even to like get a drum beat set up, it's going to take forever because you have to click each and every single hit. Now there's some things you can do, like, you know, if you have a measure set up that you like, you can extend this out, and you can do a copy paste like that and extend that out. You can also bring this entire thing in, and then you can loop it in your main window there. But still, like to set up a full measure, and that's not even getting into doing fills and stuff. So that takes forever. Sometimes I do it. If I have a really weird part that requires very, very specific drums, I'll go beat by beat. But usually you can get pretty close with this other method. So check this out. I'm gonna get rid of that. Come back up to your track menu here and go down to new drummer track. This tool right here is the one specific reason that I still use Logic. As a songwriter and a guitar player, it's the reason I am forever tied to Mac and Logic, and I can't use some souped up crazy supercomputer PC. I need this tool because for a songwriter, it's super helpful. Sometimes it helps to have a basis for some drums playing in the background, even if it's not the beat that you end up using in the final version. It helps with your timing a little bit, so you're not only playing to a metronome. This is such a handy little tool. It's so intuitive, and I'm going to show you how to use it. So you can see down at the bottom here, these are all of our controls for the drummer track. We've got a kit here with a couple of different parts of the kit highlighted. So we have a kick drum, snare, and a hi-hat. And then we have this grid. And you can see on the left side it says simple, towards the right it's more complex, loud, and soft. Pretty self-explanatory. This dot in the middle here, we can move anywhere within that grid. And as soon as I move this somewhere, you can see our little track here has changed in real time. So if we solo this and just play a little bit, that's playing a beat right there. That's a little simple, a little soft. Let's bring it super loud, really complex. Suddenly there's way more hits and it's a lot louder, a lot more intense. So that alone, I mean, you can get so many different sounds without touching anything else aside from this grid. So if you want to just lay down a groove and start jamming to something, that's your ticket right there. But there's a lot of other stuff we can do in here. We can select different parts of our kit. So let's say we want, instead of a hi-hat, we want this to be a cymbal part. And we can choose any number of different cymbals. This is going to change which cymbal is playing. So if we select one here, and we go loud and simple, this is going to be a crash. Right, makes sense. If we go down a little further here, this is probably going to be a ride, like a bell. Right, and we can still change all of these other parameters. And just in real time, just like that, you're crafting these drum beats. We see a fills knob over here. This is also very intuitive. Fills are probably the hardest thing, especially if you don't have the mind of a drummer. Creating your own MIDI drum fills is very time consuming, very tedious. To make them sound natural, This does it for you. And just by turning this knob up and down, you can create these really intuitive sounding fills. Sometimes they're better than others, but basically by turning this knob up, we're increasing the frequency that the fills are going to appear within the beat. So if this is all the way up, it's going to be like every half measure, it's going to throw a little drum roll or something. It can get pretty crazy. So let's listen to a little bit of that. I've got it pretty complex, so it's doing some weird stuff, right? There's another knob down here, which is the swing. This is pretty helpful too. Like if you're trying to write something with a swung feel, you can adjust that a little bit. This is one of those things that you kind of have to tailor to the song that you're making, depending on how heavy you want that swing feel, because it can get real boot scoot boogie in a hurry. That's almost polka. That's weird. There's some other stuff here. We've got toms. A little bit more. Pretty simple tom stuff, but you can see here we still have other options. So if we turn this up to 3, that's going to be a lot of toms. And if you're just trying to block out like a bridge or something, this is great. You know, really great to use the toms. Now, let's say we just want an intro that's only kick, right? We turn everything off. It's a little syncopated. That's because we have it more on the complex side of the grid, so we make this more simple. It's way simple. Down in the bottom here, this is our kick and snare pattern generator. So this is going to give you a whole bunch of different options for your kick and snare patterns. Each one of these has a different feel, and you can see, again, it's editing that kick. It's adding some flams in there with the snare, which is kind of cool. And it's creating these beats as if the AI, the generator here, knows that there are no other, like there's no hi-hat or anything. So it's going to add some more of those like flams because it knows, you know, you're not getting in the way of a cymbal or anything. This is the kind of stuff that early on when I was trying to program these drums that as a guitar player takes a long time to learn, which is that drummers don't have 6 arms, so you can't have 2 cymbals and 4 toms playing at the same time. This does all that for you, so you don't have to worry about too many drums playing at the same time, which is really nice. There's a couple over on the end here. There's a half time and then there's even a double time, so you can really speed things up. That's great. That's really helpful. There's one other little checkbox here that we want to check out, which is the follow. And when we turn this on, it's going to give us the option to choose any of our other audio tracks up here, and the drums will actually follow that. So if I select my bass line here, let's see if it follows that pretty well. We'll bring this down. Now, obviously, since I don't have any hi-hat or anything, it's still pretty bare, but it's picking up some of those accents. I will say this feature isn't perfect and you still need to tweak a little bit, but it's gonna get you pretty close. So again, let's add our cymbals back in and let's just hear what this beat sounds like. Okay, let's bring our guitars in, hear what that sounds like. Okay, it's like that. It's magic. And I mean, this is just a starting point. From here, there's so many other things we can do, but we've got drums. And it's simple as that. I didn't spend 2 hours tapping out every single little beat, and we have a pretty good start. Now, I would say for demo purposes, if you wanted to just comp something together to show your band and be like, hey, here's the idea. I want some crash in here. I want toms during the bridge. I want closed hi-hat in the verse. Then that's it. That's really all you need to do. But there's so much more that we can do beyond just this. One other thing I forgot to mention. Over here we have some beat presets, and on the far left you can see we actually have different drummer presets. So we have the pop rock stylings of our AI drummer Kyle. This is going to be, you know, kind of your classic alternative rock. We also have our Logan, who's our retro rocker, complete with the Neil Peart handlebar mustache and mullet combo. We got a hard rock guy, a punk rock guy, funk, and Britpop, but that's only just on the rock setting. We also have all of these other different genres, and within that we have all these other drummers, and each one of them comes with kind of their own feel, and not only that, they each come with their own drum kit, and it's going to combine like the best sounding drum kit for each of these players that kind of matches their style. Now, that being said, if we like the playing style of Neil Peart here, but we don't necessarily like the sound of this kit. It's kind of like a big roomy rock kit, right? Like, or maybe like a John Bonham sound. We don't really care for that. We can come down here and we can change this to any of these other kits. So if we want the heavy kit, same beat, but with a different sound. Okay, so we've decided which drummer we want to use. We've decided what kit we want to use, but we have exhausted all of our options here, and our beat still isn't lining up the way we want it to with our riff. So what do? Well, there's a couple different ways to get to this. This is what really unlocked the MIDI drum mapping stuff for me within Logic. We can either come up here to edit, go down to convert, and with this region selected, we convert to a MIDI region. And what that's going to do, right away we see it converted that like transient wave file, like an audio file, into MIDI notes on a piano roll. The other way, if you don't want to come up to the edit and do the convert thing, there's a key command for this. So if you go Control, Option, Command, and M, automatically changes that into MIDI notes. So that's helpful too if you're a workflow kind of guy. And with our editor window up here, we can see it's mapped out every single one of these hits. And from here, we can take this entire roll and manipulate every single beat if we want to. The nice thing about this is not only does it lay everything right out on the grid for you to see right there, but we also have it mapping all the intensity of each note, which is really helpful because if you're doing this by yourself, you have to go in and individually change the strength of each hit. And you can see some of these, like these little ghost notes on the snare. That's stuff that takes forever because not only do you have to figure out the timing, but you also have to figure out how intense to hit it. So let's play this again. And it's all right there. It's the same beat. But now if we want to come in and adjust, like let's say we want our kick to come in, you can add to this, a control click will add another kick drum. Here's our velocity controller. So if we want that to be really heavy, you can bring it up or quiet, just like that. And if we scroll up here, we can see where our crash is. And if we wanted to add some other stuff, like maybe a tambourine or something like that, you can come in, control click, there's our tambourines. You could just add this in, and again, we can select these, and we can just copy paste as many of those as we want. Let's say we want it to be a little bit louder. We can easily select those, make it louder. That's it. So from there, let's say you're pretty close, but you just want a cymbal accent on a certain beat on the measure, right? Easily come in and do that. Let's say you want to match those kick and snare up to the bass. Easy to do there. I will say, as a helpful songwriting tip, when you're creating a drum beat, you want your kick and snare to kind of line up with what your bass is doing, or vice versa. But since I usually write with the guitars and bass first, it's easier for me to come back in with the drums and line up those kicks so that they're matching up with the hits and stuff. Now, let's say we have our beat all set up, but we just can't stand the sound of this kit. Well, the last thing you can do is if you have any additional like sample libraries loaded in Logic, you can come here in your channel strip and select a different software instrument to read that MIDI information and replace it with whatever samples you have. Let's say we have Easy Drummer or Steven Slate drums. I've recently been using Superior Drummer and I love it. It's an amazing program. We can pull that in and that's going to retain all of our MIDI information here. But once we load up all of our samples, we can come in here, choose a kit that we like. I have a few presets that I really enjoy. Let's go roomy rock. I think this will fit with that riff. I will say with some of these sample libraries, they have some of their drums MIDI mapped to different notes. So you may have to come in and like maybe what is labeled as a crash on Logic is actually like a little China or something. So like if you need to come in and adjust where one of those notes is on the sample library, then that's pretty easy to do too. So we have this loaded up. Let's take a listen and hear how that sounds. Right? Okay, you hear that cymbal choke? That is this. So our tambourine turned into a cymbal choke. So there's a little bit of reorganization that takes place here. Let's hear what this sounds like. Sounds pretty good. Let's hear it with the music. I will say you can get really far with the Logic drum samples in simulators. There's a lot of kits that sound really good. I think if you're trying to really get the quality of your releases up past just a demo recording, it's worth it to look into some of these sample libraries. Superior Drummer is superior. Easy Drummer is pretty great and intuitive, and they all each have their own loops. So you can also start from there. You can pull loops from the library from Superior Drummer, drop it in, and do the same thing down here where you can just manipulate each beat so that it fits in that. They're not quite as intuitive as the Logic Drummer, which is why I still use that to kind of block out drum beats and stuff, but they're very good. And the sounds, obviously, are, I think, much better than Logic. So let's do another quick fast forward. I'm going to go ahead and tap out some stuff. I'm going to set up a intro, chorus, verse, all that stuff, and we'll take a listen to what I came up with using this method. Okay, so I played around with this for a little bit. I've kind of massaged these beats to fit that riff a little bit better. I added a fill at the beginning, and I played around with that verse to make sure it kind of fit the build up into the pre-chorus and all that. So I didn't spend a ton of time on this, but this is a pretty good start. So let's just take a listen to some of this. Right, sounds pretty good. Let's find our pre-chorus here. Over to the ride. All right, not too bad. I mean, I could spend a lot more time refining this, but that's kind of the difference, right? So, I mean, going from the writing aspect where we're really just throwing drums on here to get an idea. We're sketching things out, giving us a background so that we can write our riffs and carry on that way. But once you get into the refinement stage, that's where you can really dive in deep. And once you learn how to get this changed over from the transient side of things to the MIDI mapped notes and start moving individual beats, like that's when you really start to customize the drums to your song. And it changes from a bunch of music and drums separately to a song where they all kind of like commingle with each other. So now let's take a look at a song that I've spent a lot more time on using this method and a few other methods, and we'll take a look at what that looks like when I've spent a little more time on something. Okay, so this is a self-produced single that I released earlier this year, and this again was done all by MIDI mapping these drums. I am using Superior Drummer as my sample library for this, but it all started with writing a riff with some, Logic Drummer created loops and then coming back in and refining it and adjusting the beats. So obviously this one has a lot more starts and stops. It has a lot of breaks, and it has a few different dynamic kind of shifts in the song. So let's just take a listen to some of this and we'll highlight a couple of drum things that are happening. No drums here. Obviously, I like that real tight, compact sound. We can sleep when we're dead. We can share our daily. So you can hear like little fills and stuff in here, like this. There's a lot of stuff going on with like kind of quick little open and closed hi-hat. That kind of stuff takes a long time to figure out just because, getting that to sound natural. And still, to be honest, this doesn't sound as good as a real drummer. If I had access to like a real pro drummer to do this easily whenever I wanted to, I'd probably do that. Or if I could just learn how to play drums myself. But for now, like this has been working okay. So let's just take a listen to the little bit of the chorus here as well. You're losing interest, but I'm engaged. Obviously with the song, with the intro parts there's a lot of like start stops, a lot of cymbal chokes, which adds a lot of power there. But it's all working together, right? Like the drums need to work with the bass and the guitars. And if I were just to put a 4 on the floor beat on top of all this, it just wouldn't work. So over time, even though I say I'm a dumb guitar player and I don't know the first thing about playing drums, like you have to put yourself in the mind of a drummer and figure out, number one, is it physically, humanly possible to play this? Number two, like what does that kind of look like? And even though I couldn't play it myself, if I'm tapping out fills, for example, and I need to figure out like, okay, what does a tom pattern look like here? I'll go find music that's inspiring to me and watch other people play it and see like, okay, very rarely, if you're trying to tap out a tom roll, it's not going to be do, 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 right? They're alternating between the snare and the kick and the toms, and they're doing these little rotational patterns and stuff. So it really helps to get some kind of knowledge. Even if physically you don't have the coordination to do it yourself, like see how it's done, and that will help inform how you program these drum beats. This song, obviously, like I said, took a lot of time. I think the finished project turned out great for what I wanted it to be, for the time and the cost, the budget that I had available to me to create this. I think it turned out great. And this is just kind of a culmination of years of trial and error with this. And like I said, I've had a lot of people asking me how I do this. And so hopefully this tutorial has been really helpful for you and has, at least shown you what's possible within Logic or any recording program. All right, guys, that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this has been informative. Like I said, anybody who has questions about this kind of like self-produced music kind of stuff, this is a topic that I'd love to talk about. So please, in the comments, let me know if you have any recommendations for other videos or other topics you'd like me to talk about. Make sure you subscribe, tell all your friends, whatever. I've got some more interesting video topics coming down the pipeline, so make sure you stay tuned. And until next time, thanks for watching. See you later.